Thank you so much. I always appreciate an opportunity to address WRP. So I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about my database, just in case you're not familiar with it. We are the central repository for spatially referenced accounts of introduced aquatic species. So those are those non-indigenous, non-native, invasive. You have the synonym, we track it. If it's not where it's supposed to be, it should be in our database. We have 1,290 species we track at this time. You can see the groupings of the species there. We just added a new landing page for our marine fishes. We've always tracked marine fishes, but we wanted to give them a little extra love and gave them their own spot. So if you're interested in those, please come visit our new landing page. Our sightings are for the entire coterminous U.S., Alaska, Hawaii, and the U.S. territories. And our data ranges all the way back to the 1800s, which makes us unique amongst many of the databases, because we actually go within the literature and historical records and mine out that information so you get a complete view of invasions. Now, all this data that we get, it comes from mostly you guys. We get it from museums, from agencies, both federal and state, from researchers, and we have a citizen science component, because you can report a sighting directly to us. And I'm happy to say often those citizen science reports end up being very important new introductions that we find. So a little bit about the database. So you know as far as distribution maps, and we saw some yesterday, which I was excited to see, and that includes native ranges. Yes, the invasive species database is making native ranges, and I'd argue they're better than nature serves. So if you want to come look at them, please do. We also have an API that serves out that information if you want to utilize it in any of your programs. But we're a little more than that. We're also data source and references. We scour the literature. We spend a lot of time going through integrating all the types of new information, the new research that's going on across the U.S. We're also species profiles. We spend a lot of time looking and kind of updating information on all these species, how to identify them, what are their ecological needs, thinking about habitat and food and reproduction. We have a new section that we're expanding, which are impacts, which I'm going to talk a little later. But what we're really trying to invest a lot into right now are actionable maps and tools. Because a large data set is great. It's great to have over 500,000 records in the database, but utilizing that information can often be hard. And so we're investing a lot in providing ways and means that managers can look at our data in different ways for different specific tasks. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So I like to usually go through what I affectionately call the state of the region, and I do this for all the regional panels that we go to, myself, Matt Nielsen, and Ian Finsting. And so these are all the new alerts that we've gotten since last October. And 56 sounds like a lot, but I promise I do this for all the regions, and that's not bad. Florida will beat you down. So these are alerts that are new to either the state, the county, or the drainage. These are ones we sent out on our NS alert reports. If you're not familiar with our alerts, I would encourage you to come to our website and to sign up. You can sign up for a specific state, you can sign up for specific species, and we're expanding that list, so there'll be more options of more species if you just care about one. Or you can just sign up for all of them, and you can get your inbox inundated with all of our alerts, because we, as Susan points out, send out a lot of them. So for the West, we only had 6 new for states, 46 new for drainages, and a few bonus ones, which are usually high priority species like our quagga zebra mussels. Groups, mollusks are king out west. We got a lot of alerts for the mollusks, of course, as they're moving around. And then you can see the states, and I'm sorry, Monica, I always pick on you, but no, I love you. Texas, 13, yes, I'm sorry. So I did want to point out some of the more interesting ones, the ones that we're concerned about, and no surprise, zebra quaggas. The good news, of course, they're not spreading in all the areas we're really concerned. They're kind of moving within drainages. So you can see we got 2 bonus alerts for Southern California. California's asked us to send out every time we have a new quagga sighting an alert. And then, again, sorry, Monica, a little movement in Texas as we're moving those zebra mussels around between the reservoirs and going downstream. So I have my botanist, Ian Finsting. He kind of pointed out some interesting plant movements. Here's the yellow iris, a popular ornamental in aquatic gardens. There's 6 new drainage alerts within California and Colorado, so something to think about that's moving around. We also have my favorite little snail, New Zealand mud snail, still boogieing around. And you can see 4 new drainage alerts for California and Washington. And it's, of course, moving downstream in the Carmel River. Curly-leaf pondweed, we have 3 new changes throughout multiple states. They got Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. And so now I want to introduce you to a few of our new updated actionable maps and tools. Now, I actually don't have enough time to stand up here and tell you about all of them because we have so much going on. So I'm going to give you a very thin thumbnail of these, and if you have interest and want to talk more, please come find me because I can discuss these. So we're still making our alert risk maps, or ARM. A lot of acronyms in the NAS program, so just be ready. These accompany all those alerts that we send out, and the idea behind these is we're showing a short-term risk assessment of the potential spread of the species. So if the species became established, where are all the areas at risk based on its distribution potential? Is it an active swimmer? Is it a passive drifting species? And the barriers within that drainage. We're going to start enhancing these also with boat launches. So we've not really considered human vectors within these risks, but obviously we're very concerned in this room about boat trafficked invasive species. And so we've now created a national boat launch and marina layer. It is going to be publicly available soon. We're only missing 3 states. And so once we get those states on board and get their information, we'll make it publicly available and you can all utilize it. But we want to integrate that into our risk maps. We're also still making our flood and storm tracker maps. These are fast. You may not be familiar with these because these mostly deal with hurricanes. The only state represented on our maps right now is Texas within the room with Hurricane Harvey. But what we do with these is we track the potential flooding and movement of invasive species. So we make an initial map right after a hurricane hits, 2 to 3 days literally after the hurricane. That's why the FAST acronym really makes sense here. And then we go back few months later and take all the information provided about the flooding event, high water marks, gauges, on-the-ground information, and actually model where we see connections between drainages and what species could potentially spread between them. The most recent one we've done was for Hurricane Dorian. So the 3 big ones I want to spend a little more time on, which you may not have heard about, is our new impact tables, our biosurveillance tool, SANED, and then environmental DNA, and what we plan on doing with that within the database. So our impact tables. All of us in here know there are important impacts about invasive species, but often we're really limited on our knowledge on them because there's a lot of anecdotal stuff out there. And to be honest, that's bothersome. We need to be honest and upfront on what we do and don't know about these invasive species. And so what the NAS database is doing is we're taking 100 of what we're affectionately calling the big baddies, and we're scouring the literature and coming up with lists of impacts that are known, observed, or anecdotal on these species. And we're breaking down into 3 super categories. We have our ecological group, our economic impacts, and then human health. And within each of these subcategories, we're going to provide information about those known impacts. So all of you don't have to worry about scouring the literature anymore. You can come to our database and get this information. Now, let's give an example of the way we're going to display this. Here's one of my new favorite baddies in the southeast. This is the Cuban tree frog, now the largest tree frog in North America. It's a voracious carnivore. It eats all of our natives, well established in Florida, but it's moving. It's moving north along the East Coast on palm plants and on cars, because they'll hitchhike on cars. It's going down I-10 to Texas, and so it's a big problem, and one of those species we're really trying to encourage states to think about EDRR with. Well, why are they so bad? Well, here's the known impacts. We know they are predaceous. They eat all of our natives. We know they compete with the natives. There's infrastructure issues with them. There's actually been some power outages associated with them, and there's a human health impact because they have excretions from their skin which can irritate you. And so we'll have icons, much like you see here, on our profiles for the species. Everybody loves an emoji and an icon, so we're going to create our own that'll be kind of displayed. But what you'll be able to do is select one, say predation, and we'll come up with a full list of all the literature that supports that known impact. And so we're planning on expanding this to all of our species over time, starting with the 100 now and moving out into the future. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about biosurveillance. And I've got a new tool for you, and I'm going to ask you, have you SANED your fisheries data? And it sounds funny, because everybody in this room cares about exotics and invasive species, but there's lots of other fishery managers collecting data. There's universities, there's NGOs out there collecting data that don't have interest in invasives and have lots of information that we could potentially use. So I've helped develop a tool with funding through an internal grant with USGS that allow those people to screen their data for invasive and exotic species. What this will allow the person to do is to upload a CSV file of that information of all the species and locations. We'll run it through those ranges that we develop, both the native and non-native ranges for the species, and we'll provide back to that person that same CSV file with more information. So let me break it down a little bit for you. This will live somewhere on our front page. This is just a mock-up. It's not actually there yet. I hope this goes live in December. That's the plan right now. And you clicked on the same tool and you upload your CSV, and this is how it's going to work. We're going to run it through our system. And so all of this is happening in real time. I'm not doing this on the back end. This is automated. We'll run it through a system, and based on the location, we're going to look for, one, spatial accuracy, because we don't want to tell you something's non-native just because you have a bad lat long. Two, we're going to run it through and look through the native range. So if it's a native transplant, we'll tell you if it's in the native range or not. And three, if you're interested, we can add additional information since we're already in there. We could tell you the HUC that it's in. We could tell you later on the National Hydrographical Dataset location it is. Those are stream names and locations. And then we'll provide you back with a CSV of all this information. Now, the best part of this is all happening without us ever downloading the data. So if you're worried about data sensitivity, we will never see the data that you run through here. What we hope is we're going to provide you with two CSVs, the full one, and then a second one of all the information we hope you'd send to us. And we're going to encourage the user to send it to us so we can integrate it into the database. So there's data security there. So if you're a grad student finishing up your thesis, you don't have to worry about somebody trying to scoop you. Or if you're worried about T&E species within your data, you don't have to worry about that getting into our database. So, all right, big one, eDNA. And I'm so glad the eDNA people went before I presented, because it makes this a lot easier for me. NAS would like to aggregate all the aquatic invasive species eDNA data within the system. And what this means is there's a lot of good work, as you've heard, being done. Adam's group, Chris's group, the Forest Service, BLM, NOAA, a lot of people are interested in eDNA. And what we hope is we can be a central node that we can integrate the presence and absence data within it with the collaboration of all these people, and now the states. And so I am going to spend the next year doing some town hall webinars where I'm going to go around to all the regions and encourage you to participate and provide feedback. Because what I want is collaboration, I want cohesion, and I want to know what you're concerned about and some buy-in. And so the first thing I'm going to tell you we're going to do, and this is part of that communication, and we had great conversations last night with the eDNA subcommittee, it was a subcommittee of the subcommittee, about communication. And the first one, if for some reason our database gets something from an NGO or a private citizen group, we're going to let you know about it. You're never going to find out from an alert. It's always going to come to you first, and you get to decide how we move forward with it. Two, we're going to develop this conservative minimum standards. So Susan Pascal talked about that. That's part of our group working with Maggie Hunter. Part of this, round the U.S. town hall meetings is to kind of build what are the minimum standards that we're going to require, and we really vision a vetted list of all the trusted sources. So if information comes from somebody from that list, we trust that it's quality because there is no verification for this. It's not like the other specimens. Three, we're going to make this as easy to interpret as possible. We're going to make it very easy to understand. We see a hierarchy, much like what Adam kind of laid out, of what the information means. It's also going to live separate from our specimen data, so there'll be no confusion. We understand that definition. This is a DNA detection, not a specimen detection, and we're going to keep those separate within the database. They're going to be two separate maps, so there's no confusion or overlap. And we want to work closely with you. That's the whole point of these town halls. I haven't scheduled it yet. I'll work within the eDNA group to kind of make that decision. We want to get feedback before we move forward. We want to get the stakeholder involvement early. So, like I said, we're going to do this next year, holding these regional town halls. I see breaking because you guys are such a big region, breaking it up into the Southwest and the Pacific Northwest webinars, so having them independent help, I'm assuming, from some Fish and Wildlife friends. So, other things we're doing, we're working with industry, and I would like to expand this. So we're working with the Sea Pilots Association. We're feeding our database up to them so they can put on their app what actually exotics are in their water bodies. And this relationship's only going to get better because we are going to enhance the database with more information so you can actually query out a single water body. So not just a drainage, not just a county, but a single water body, and you'll know all the AIS that are in that water body. We're also working with some exploratory things with CD3. A lot of interest in work with industry. If we can empower industry with our database, we want to do that. We want to provide the information to you, and if you want to discuss how we can do that, I'm always open to that. So I want to leave you with 2 final things. Number 1, we have a lot of talent in the NAS program. We're all biologists. I know you think of us as data people, but we all have the degrees in biology. We have a lot of expertise, and we're always very open to working with you, to collaborating. If you have a special data request, if you need a special map, we're always very responsive to that and quick to come to your help. And the second thing, we are under new management at NAS, and so we want to take a step back and hear from you what you think we're doing well, what we're doing poorly, and what would you like to see us to do. And I really hope, because I come to these meetings, I get excited about all the new science we're talking about, I really hope somebody in here has a crazy great idea that they don't know how to implement and will come to me and talk about, because I love those collaborations. I'm doing one with Tim right now. I get excited about those collaborations, and that's what we're here for, is to help serve you. If we can help, we want to. I'll take questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Fantastic job. Thank you. That's a great product. I use this quite often myself, but one wall that I come across is the border with Canada.
I am glad you. So I told you we couldn't talk about everything. Yes. So we're starting with the Great Lakes, and NOAA's help. We're going to start expanding into Canada, and I've been making inroads with people in British Columbia and other regions. So it is a hope that we can start putting more Canadian points, because it is silly for many of our watersheds, especially the Great Lakes, you can't just cut it in half, to think about both sides of it. So yes, we are expanding to Canada. We should have Canadian HUCs for the Great Lakes up before December. And so that will be a new way of querying data within our database. Great question, thank you. So another point I didn't get to put up is our API. If you're not familiar with that, that's just a way we serve out the data. It is now NASMA standard, and so it's available for right now to you all. So any one of you in this room can come in and download our entire database if you wanted to. It's there, it's for you to use, and so that's just another way you can access our data, or you can, of course, go through the website, or contact me. I'll send you the data. So, great question, thank you. Yes, sir.
So a lot of states have different databases, and like we use in Oregon IMAP invasives, and my understanding was that there was some regular communication, uploading, and exchange of data. Is that happening? Are you getting our data?
It is going to happen very soon, especially with IMAPs. I'm so glad you mentioned that one, because Lori Scott and I had a long, important conversation at the NASMA meeting last week, and we are going to be more actively sharing data more frequently. Now, it's always been a goal. There are just some technical issues. One of the good things about developing that NASMA standard on the quality of the data is now we can share more freely. So yes, IMAPs, we're going to share more easily. EDMAPs is still in the process. If I know Colorado and Utah is using EDMAPs. We're working with Chuck Bargeron. We're going to get there. Bison, we basically already have most of Bison's data sets already, but we are actively working with Annie Simpson and that group also. So that's coming. The IMAPs, I am hoping we'll have a full data sharing, let's say by spring, and we're planning on doing some kind of demonstration project between our two good systems and NatureServe, showing all the ways that you can use this information together. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
As your friendly neighbor from the north, I'm very happy to hear that Canadian data is getting integrated in, and maybe we can chat over the break, like how's best to coordinate getting that Canadian data to you. I sit on the Canadian National Aquatic Invasive Species Committee, so be good to find out what's the best way to coordinate getting that data to you, and what species do you want it for. And
that's wonderful. I really appreciate that. Thank you, and we'll definitely speak. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Wes. I don't have a question. Just you had some big shoes to fill when Pam retired, and you were doing amazing. So thank you. Your presentations are always super engaging. And for those of you who have not had the chance to use this tool, please do. It's very powerful and just getting better. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yes, please, Alan.
So can you maybe address a little bit the question of there's a lot of databases out there, which, you know, we're talking about EdMaps and other things. And I think, you know, having a universal system like this is really important and helpful, and I have no questions about that. But can you maybe talk a little bit about the value of some of these, maintaining some of these other regional databases? Because it sounds, you know, it's not like we want the Amazon of databases, that USGS has full control of all databases in the United States. But I mean, it just seems there's some tension of like, do we all trying to go towards one national database, which is really important, and we see the value of that. Can you speak a little bit to why it's good for these other people to keep going?
Absolutely, and I appreciate it. That's a really good point. So Western Governors Association recognized there's 4 big databases. There's the IMAPS group, there's ourselves, NAS, Bison, which is another USGS product, and then EdMaps. And so each of us came together. We had a meeting 2 years ago, and we said, what do we do well? What are we not doing well? And we kind of recognized uniqueness of this. And to that point that Alan's making, you know, you should maintain your own database, because there's information that you want in there that maybe we don't house, especially if you're thinking of, you know, eradications or treatments or those kind of methodological things that are important to your programs. Yes, you should maintain those. But to the point of trying to be centralized, we're trying to get the 4 databases to kind of be their own centralized, because we are all unique. We're only aquatic. So we will never be anybody's state database. So Colorado and Utah have adopted EdMaps, so is Minnesota, Wisconsin. We can't be that because we're only aquatic. But what we do real well is make all these actionable tools. We're trying to develop data. I've made a waterfalls data list. You want all the waterfalls of the US? I can give you that. And so those are the things that we do well. And so to the point is maintain the regional databases, but communicate with us in ways that we can integrate your data so everyone has it, because it's the sharing which makes this all very, very powerful. Thank you, Alan.